Okay, so we're on Daf Bet Amud Bet. So again, the Beitzah, Shnodah B'Yom Tov. So again, we had four explanations in the Gemara. So far, we've seen two of them. Explanation number one was Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says we're dealing with a Tarnagolet Haomedet Legadel Beitzim, and the whole question is one about Muktzah. And according to Beit Shammai, therefore there is no Muktzah. According to Beit Hillel, here there is Muktzah. And we saw that there was a kasha. The reason the Gemara ultimately does not accept Rav Nachman totally is because it could have then said Tarnagolet u Beitzata. Why does it just say the Beitzah and not the Tarnagolet? All right, that was explanation number one. Explanation number two, and this is where we are now. We're about halfway down the Fetim Bet. Amar Rabba leolam b'Tarnagolet haomedet la'achila. Says Rabbi, no, it really is a Tarnagolet which is designated for to be eaten, and therefore Muktzah would not be a problem, seemingly. But what's the chiddush? That we're dealing not just with any old Yom Tov, but we're dealing with Yom Tov, which is samuch to Shabbat. Yom Tov falls out on Motzei Shabbat and Yom Rishon. So then what's the problem? Mishum hachana, that there is a problem here of hachana, of preparation. Because of our Rabbah, why? Where is the hachana? What's the preparation which has been done? So according to Rashi, he's going to explain to us that we're dealing with, even though it's hachana b'dei shamayim, it's not anything that we've done. It's hachana b'dei shamayim, so to speak, the making of the egg, but that was done on Shabbat, and Shabbat cannot prepare for Yom Tov. He says, Mishum hachana kasavar Rava, kol beitzah demityalda ha'idna, even though the egg is laid now, me'etmol gmarala, it was completed yesterday. It was good. That was the hachana that was done b'dei shamayim. That was on Shabbat. What does it mean in the pasuk regarding the man? Where does Rabbi learn this from? That the hachana, the preparation, has to take place already from Yom Shishi, from Yom Chol, because the pasuk says Vaya b'Yom Shishi hechinu et asher yaviu. That it means on the day before Shabbat, you have to prepare it. Chol mechin Shabbat, v'chol mechin Yom Tov. On a day of Chol, you can prepare for Shabbat or for Yom Tov. V'ein Yom Tov mechin Shabbat, v'ein Shabbat mechina Yom Tov. But Yom Tov cannot prepare for Shabbat. Shabbat cannot prepare for Yom Tov in terms of this. So, what exactly is this hachana that has to be done? This is what's known colloquially as hachana de Rabba, which is a bit of a play on words, because Rabbi is obviously his name, but sometimes we talk about things, you say Shabbat requires hachana de Rabba, means great preparation, but this is where it comes from. So let's just look in Rashi for a moment. Rashi, going a bit further back, where he says, Mishum hachana, he says, the Asri la Beit Hillel kidim farish va'azim. In other words, that's why Beit Hillel say that ordinarily, we're not going to say muktzah because the Tarnagolet haomedet la'achila. That's what the Gemara asked right at the beginning. He said, why don't you say it's uchla de'efra? So he said, no, it's a separate part of prohibition here of hachana. Says Rashi, kol beitzah demityalda ha'idna me'etmol gmarala ve'af al gav devidei shamayim. Right? No one is. What is this preparation that was done? The designation that was done on this egg. It was created. No human being had anything to do with it. This is hachana. This is b'dei shamayim. Nonetheless, asur the ba'in and kol sodot Shabbat sodot Yom Tov shumezumanot umuchanot mibod Yom Shalchol. The meals for Shabbat and for Yom Tov have to be prepared in this way already from Yom Chol. Now we know that there's certain preparations you would still be allowed to do on Shabbat. Certainly on Yom Tov, you're allowed to cook. And what the Rishonim are going to explain here, I think Rashi is going to say it later, or if not Rashi, it may be Tosfot, who says that the cooking is essentially just a tikkun ba'alma. Then you're just correcting the food, but the food was there, the food existed, it was designated, it was there in the world already from before Shabbat and from before Yom Tov. Continues Rashi. Letame d'amar Rabba. Sorry, I skipped. Verabba says Dasar b'achana she'ina b'yadai mamash. Right, he prohibits any this hachana that was done, even though it wasn't done b'yadayim. This has to be done before Yom Tov. L'tamei damar Rabba b'psachim v'yalef ta'acha demuktzeh d'oraita. We saw yesterday that Rabbi holds based on this, then muktzah is doraita. What you see from this Rashi as well, that Rashi understands that the hachana, all that the hachana means is essentially the opposite of making it muktzah. It says that the food, in order to prepare the food, that to prepare it, to designate it before Yom Tov, and therefore that it takes it out of muktzah. That's the hachana that we are talking about. And therefore, Rabbi holds, if it was only created on Shabbat or on Yom Tov, that is too late to designate it and to make it unmuktzah. Vehechinu, says Rashi, Vazminu, right? Designated. Kagon mikan ani ochel lemachar. You can look at it and you say, from here I'm going to eat tomorrow. You don't have to do anything b'yadayim. You can just say it. If it meant to say that it was actual preparation, actual physical preparation, has to be cooked, has to be baked the day before. That is true regarding Shabbat, but that is learned from a separate pasuk. Here it's designating orally. Uchtiv bayom hashishi. When it says bayom hashishi, v'stam shishi cholhu. Even though you could have situations where Yom HaShishi is going to be Yom Tov, but the pasuk is speaking generically. It's talking about Yom HaShishi, which is a Yom Chol. And we said that the Suda of Shabbat is considered significant, therefore that it needs the preparation on Yom Chol. This is going to be in contrast to a meal of Chol, which does not actually require, which is not significant, doesn't require designation. That's what. So the next Rashi says, "En Yom Tov mechin leShabbat." He says, "Yom Tov nami karoi Shabbat, ubaye sudato hazmana." Says Yom Tov, similarly to Shabbat, also would require this designation, this preparation of your meal. V'azmanata b'chol, and that has to be done on a weekday. Now Rashi explains about sudat chol. Lo chashiva, comes to a weekday meal, that does not have the same significance. V'lo shaycha b'hazmana, that does not need this preparation. Hilkach b'echad v'shabbat ba'alma leit lan nemesa beitzah shenolda bei. Therefore, on an ordinary Yom Rishon, ordinary Sunday, first day after Shabbat, if according to Rabbi the egg is laid on Shabbat, that means that it was prepared on Shabbat. Nonetheless, that is not forbidden because the weekday meal does not need preparation in the same way that Shabbat does. Right, you might have thought that it would need because it was prepared bidei shamayim on Shabbat. When it comes to a weekday meal, we don't require it. There is no muktzah when it comes to a weekday meal. Okay. Tosfot, the long Tosfot has a very interesting discussion over here as well. Maybe I don't think we'll get into it now, but I'll just mention. Tosfot has discussion based on this as to whether the man actually fell on Yom Tov or not. He talks about towards the end of the Tosfot, he talks about this idea. We talk about Shabbat preparing for Yom Tov and Yom Tov preparing for Shabbat. And there are actually, it turns out, conflicting midrashim as to whether the man fell on Yom Tov as well. We know the man did not fall on Shabbat. This is where we're learning it from, and therefore the double portion was taken. According to some, the man did fall on Yom Tov. According to some, it did not. And the nafkamina for that would be whether we are required to have lechem mishne on Yom Tov the same way that we are on Shabbat, practically speaking. I mean, is that we have lechem mishne also on Yom Tov. But now, so the Gemara says the following. If we go back, we said, Amar Rabba my dichtiv hayabam shishi achinu tashaviu chol mechina Shabbat v'chol mechina Yom Tov and Yom Tov mechina Shabbat and Shabbat mechina leYom Tov. Amar le Abaye. So Abaye now asks the following question of Rabba. We're about a third of the way up from the bottom of the page. Amar le Abaye, Ela me'ata Yom Tov ba'alma tishtale. Okay, Rabba, you're saying again, we're dealing with a Tarnagolet which is omeret le'achila. So our default position was that we thought that there is no muktzah. There's no muktzah when it comes to the egg. We then said, no, wait a minute. We're dealing with Hachana de Rabba. We're dealing with Yom Tov, which comes after Shabbat. Because it's Yom Tov that is after Shabbat, the egg is going to be muktzah because of the fact that it was finally prepared on Shabbat, the day before. So then what about an ordinary Yom Tov? Says Abai, if it's an ordinary Yom Tov, there should be no problem. because the egg was prepared on chol, and therefore there's no muktzah. And what does our Mishnah say? Although Rabbi, you're saying that it's because of Yom Tov that comes on after Shabbat. The Mishnah just said Beitzah Shnoda Yom Tov. So Amale Abaye Elamata Yom Tov Almei Tishtoi. Says Abaye, then it should therefore be that any ordinary Yom Tov, an ordinary weekday, not after Shabbat, the egg would be permitted. Answers Rabbi, no. He says Gzera Mishum Yom Tov Achal Shabbat. He says no. So here we have a Gzera. Again, the reason why it's not going to be allowed. The reason why it's not going to be allowed is because of a Yom Tov that is after Shabbat. And because we're concerned about a Yom Tov after Shabbat, so Chazal say, we make a Gezerah, that on any Yom Tov, this egg's going to be forbidden. Again, obviously, all of this is just according to Beit Hillel. On any Yom Tov, it's going to be forbidden in Gezerah, because sometimes there'll be a Yom Tov which will be after Shabbat. Okay. So now, says the opposite question, Shabbat Alma Tishtarei. So then, on an ordinary Shabbat, it should be permitted. Right? Our assumption now was that it's on Yom Tov, it's going to be on Shabbat. It says Shabbat Alma Tishtarei. And again, answers Rabbi, Gzera Mishum Shabbat Achal Yom Tov. So there we say no. We have the Gezerah in the other way. Sometimes Shabbat will be, sometimes Yom Tov will be after Shabbat. Sometimes Yom Tov will be before Shabbat. So on an ordinary Shabbat, this egg would be forbidden as well as the Gezerah because of a Shabbat which comes after Yom Tov. So now questions the Gemara hanging. There's a lot of Gezerot going in. It says Umi Gazrina. Do we really say this Gezerah? We're going to have a question. Of whether we are maybe going too far, maybe making Gzerot to Gzerot. Right? He says, Mi Gazrina, V'hatanya. We have the following bright. Hashochetet et anagolet, umatzaba beitzim gmurot, mutarot leochlan beyom tov. So somebody kills a chicken, and he finds the eggs which are inside. So, Hashochetet et anagolet, umatzaba beitzim gmurot, mutarot leochlan beyom tov. You are allowed to eat, so you're allowed to eat them. Later on, the Gemara is going to go into a bit more discussion when we get to Daf Vav in terms of these eggs, how you find them and where they are, and are they parav, at what stage, are they connected to the chicken, are they not connected to the chicken? Very interesting discussion there, which by the way has practical ramifications in the world of kashrut, and has many nafkamina and many implications for contemporary questions of taking egg cells and making meat for them. It's all a lot connected to the sugya. But in any event, connected to our Mishnah now, it says mutarot leochlan beyom tov. So this takes place on Yom Tov. So if on Yom Tov, we just said that on Yom Tov, if the egg is laid on Yom Tov, it would be forbidden. But now we're saying that if you were to kill the chicken and to find the eggs inside, again, the assumption is these eggs were produced, the hachana took place at the same time. You could now take these eggs and eat them. And here's the question: imita, if it's true that we are extending this gezerah to extra cases as well, it's not just the case of the Yom Tov Shechal Achar Shabbat. It says if it's true that you're going to make this gezerah, ligzol mishum hanach, demit yaldan b'yom ehen. Right? If it's the case that you're going to extend the Gezerah, you should extend the Gezerah to this case as well. If we're saying that the egg was laid on Yom Tov, you cannot eat it. So if you kill the chicken and you find the eggs inside which have not yet been laid, it should be forbidden to partake of those eggs on Yom Tov because as a Gezerah, because of when the eggs are laid and they're not found inside the chicken. That's the question. So Amarle, he says, no, there's going to be a difference. There's a difference between the case of just an ordinary Yom Tov or an ordinary Shabbat, where the egg is laid, which is made as a Gzerah because of Yom Tov, which might be because of Yom Tov, which comes after Shabbat, versus if the eggs are, if one slaughters a chicken and finds the eggs inside, over there we won't extend the Gezerah. Why? What's the difference? He says, Amale beitzim gmurot b'mei iman milta de lo shchichai Umilta de lo shchicha lo gazul bar Rabbanan. This is a fundamental principle that we have when it comes to Gzerot Rabbanan, number of principles we have. One of them is that something which is not a likely scenario, something which is very, very uncommon, Rabbanan did not make a Gzera. So a chicken that's going to lay an egg, that's a common scenario. That happens all the time. Yom Tov is going to come after Shabbat. That's sometimes Yom Tov is after Shabbat. So therefore they made the Gzera. They said because, according to Rabbi, there's Achana, when Yom Tov comes after Shabbat, if you lay the egg, therefore the egg cannot be consumed. So we'll extend that Gzeira. We'll extend it to an ordinary Yom Tov because of Yom Tov after Shabbos. We'll extend it to an ordinary Shabbat because of Shabbat after Yom Tov. We won't extend it though to the case whereby on Yom Tov you find the egg inside the chicken and not the egg that's been laid. Because it's not a common scenario. It's not a common scenario that somebody goes and slaughters a chicken and finds the eggs inside, and therefore the Gzerah does not extend to that. So just a couple of points. Also, in terms of Shabbat, so you might be thinking, well, on Yom Tov, I understand what I could do with the eggs. I could cook it. On Shabbat, I can't cook an egg. That's completely forbidden. That's an Isur D'Oraita. What could you do on Shabbat with the egg? So the answer is that we find a number of places. The Gemara refers to swallowing an egg whole. See Rashi over here. Rashi, the first of the wide lines, where he says Shabbat be'alma she'eno achar Yom Tov. Tishtere, you would have thought that it would be allowed. It says ligmoa beitzah chaya she'no dabo, to swallow the egg. To swallow the egg raw. Apparently, this is something some people may still do it. Apparently, it's good for your voice, and it's used as a medical remedy for certain things. The Gemara mentions that a number of places. I'll leave it to you to decide if you'd like to try that at home or not. But anyway, so that is regarding Shabbat. The second point, which Rashi mentions here, in terms of the case of the finding the eggs inside the chicken, says Rashi Avatanya, he says, Im tomar havyale gzera ligzera. You're going to say, yeah, there's going to be a gzera ligzera. We just say we don't make a gzera where something is uncommon. We also don't make a gzera to a gzera. Rabbinic gzera is something is forbidden midoraita. Rabbanan said, don't do X so that you won't come to do Y, which is forbidden midoraita. But if Rabbanan say, don't do X midrabanan because you might come to do Y, which is asur midrabanan, which the reason you can't do Y is, which is the Rabbanan, is so that you don't do Z, which is the Doraita. So that is a gzera ligzera. So are we now saying, wait a minute, if it's Yom Tov and you would kill the chicken and you would find the eggs inside, don't eat the eggs. Why? Because that's a gzera, because what about the case where on Yom Tov, the chicken lays the eggs and you can't eat those? And why is that forbidden? Because of the case where Yom Tov, which falls over Shabbat. So that's the question. You would think this is a gzera ligzera. Dehanach de mityeldin b'yomehen, says Rashi. Those which are, if it's a gzera because of the eggs which are laid on Yom Tov, nami einan asulot ela mishum gzera. Those are also only forbidden in the first place because of a gzera of Yom Tov achar Shabbat. So here you see that it's another step further removed. So answers Rashi Taretz. Now, at the end of the day, we don't say this gzera, but the reason we don't say this gzera is because the Gemara said, because it's not likely, it's milta de lo shchicha. But why didn't we just say, because the gzera l'gzera? So says Rashi, Taritz hamatzi le'ukme b'yom tov achar Shabbat. You could explain the whole thing here talking about Yom Tov achar Shabbat. In other words, what the Gemara is saying is, why don't we have a gzera of, if on a Yom Tov, which is after Shabbat, we find the eggs inside the chicken? And we would think that is a gzera because of the eggs which were laid that day, which is Yom Tov achar Shabbat, which is not a gzera in the first place. Yafe. Okay, that's more or less what Rashi says. Let's just see quickly. That is answer number 2. The Gemara is now going to bring answer number 3 and answer number 4 as to how to explain this Mishnah. So number 1 was Rav Nachman who said it was the Beitzah Hamed Tanagolet Hamed Legadel Beitzim, and it's all because of Muktzeh. Answer number 2 was Rabbi who said no, it's really a Tanagolet Hamed La'achila, and the problem with the egg is because of Yom Tov that is after Shabbat, and it's a case of Hachana. The Hachana was done on Shabbat. Because it's a problem of Yom Tov achar Shabbat, we extend the Gzera to any Yom Tov. Answer number 3. Answer number 3 in the Gemara. We're now in the second last line. Daf Bet Amud Bet. Rav Yosef Amar Gzera Mishum Perot HaNoshrim. So interesting. By the way, according to what we see is that according to nearly everybody, this din is going to be derabanan. But the moment we say that it's a gzera, it's also din derabanan. The only case where this egg would be forbidden midoraita would be according to Rabbi, and only when it's actually Yom Tov Achar Shabbat. But any other time, any other Yom Tov, according to everybody, it's going to be a so derabanan. So Rav Yosef says, why it's a gzera? Because of perot ha-noshrim. What is perot? What is perot ha-noshrim? So says Rashi, the last Rashi on the page, Rav Yosef Amar, Ta'amat Beitzah b'tarnagolet ha'omedet l'achila. Okay, so first of all, the Gemara here doesn't say to us, are we now dealing with which kind of tarnagolet are we dealing with? Rav Yosef says we stick with the last thing we had, says Rashi. So we're still dealing with a chicken which is there for eating. So again, there's no problem of muktzah. Udu kimna ubeit Hillel the asri mishum perot hanoshrim min ha'ilan b'Shabbat. Beit Hillel forbid it because of a different thing we have of perot hanoshrim min ha'ilan b'Shabbat. You have fruit which falls from a tree on Shabbat. What is perot hanoshrim? You can't go and pick the fruit from the tree on Shabbat. That itself that's going to be a so that's be a melacha of kotzer. And Rabbanan made a gzera that even if the fruit falls by itself, you can't eat it because you might then go and pick. Right? So he says like this. Says Rashi, Kasal Kadata. Hashtag Zerai Mishum Perot HaNoshrin Delo Nichelinu Da'anami LePerot HaNoshrin Min HaIlan Damya. Right, that this, you would think, since we have this gzera of fruit which falls from a tree, so the egg which falls from the chicken, so to speak, it's similar to fruit which falls from a tree. Da'anami LePerot HaNoshrin Min HaIlan Damya. You could similarly call it just as a tree, a fruit that comes off. So too, the egg that comes out of the chicken, you would think that it's a similar idea, and therefore was included in this gzera. So Malay Abaye, the last line of the Gemara, Malay Abaye, perot hanoshrin tamamai. Again, we're going to come back to the same difficulty we just had of gzera ligzera. He says, why are perot hanoshrim? Why are those going to be forbidden in the first place? Top of Daf Gimel, he says gzera shema yaleh v'yitlosh. Right, it's a gzera that you might, once you start eating the fruit that's fallen off the tree, so you might climb up the tree and go and pick some more fruit off. So again, the perot hanoshrim itself is a gzera. So he gufa gzera. Now you're telling me ana neko v'nigzol gzera legzera. We're going to come and we're going to make a new gzera. We don't do that. In other words, what's the problem? You're saying that there's a gzera of perot hanoshrim. Don't eat the perot hanoshrim because you might go to pick more fruit off the tree. So now we're saying you can't eat the egg that comes off the chicken. Why? Because then you might come to eat the fruit that comes off the tree, and then you might come to go and pick the fruit off the tree in the first place. That's gzera ligzera. So answers the Gemara, no. He says, Kula chada gzera. It's all one gzera. That's very many times the answer when we have a question of the gzera ligzera, and we say Kula chada gzera. In other words, it was incorporated in the original gzera. When they made the gzera of perot hanoshrim, they said perot hanoshrim, and anything which is similar to perot hanoshrim, including the egg which is laid by the chicken, that cannot be eaten on Shabbat. Why? Because if you eat the egg, then you might climb a tree and take off the fruit. It's not gzera ligzera. It's all included in the original gzera. Okay, when we see Rav Yitzchak's answer number 4, we'll see that we have a similar sort of logic which plays out. So ad kan. Shukach. Thank you, everybody. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Thank you very much.